Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our Black Empowerment Works Grant Workshop #1 for this year, all around the topic of Are You Grant Ready? This workshop is being presented by the United Way of Greater Cincinnati in partnership with our friends at Table and BI3. My name is Janae Bradley, and I'm the Director of Black-led Social Change at United Way. Joining me on the call today to round out the Black Empowerment Works team are Jeremiah Pennebaker and Will Simpson, our Senior Associate and Coordinator, respectively. So if you ever call into the Black Empowerment Works line, or you ask a question or schedule a question session, you will be connecting with one of the three of us, and we're so excited to get to support you on that journey. But you're not just going to hear from us today. We're so excited to have our special guest speaker, Christy Coons. Christy is the president and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Southwestern Ohio, as well as a member of Table. Table stands for Transformational Advancement of Black Leadership and Excellence. They're an organization that's on a mission to serve as a hub to catalyze, incubate, and champion transformational Black leaders and solutions to some of our community's most pressing challenges. We're so excited to have them in this work with us. During our time today, we're going to do a couple of things. First, I'll provide an overview of Black Empowerment Works, including some of the basic eligibility, and then I'll turn it over to Christy to lead up the elements of grant readiness, where we'll touch on both programmatic readiness and operational. While we have some content that we'll share, we'll also build out time for questions and answers. So we hope that you're ready with your questions. Thank you to those of you who submitted your questions during the registration process. We will get to the ones that are sort of germane to this session. So I'm going to start from the top. United Way of Greater Cincinnati is focused on building solutions and aligning systems to help our community thrive. The way that I like to explain it is that we like to support there being services in our community to address the needs of people as they exist today, while also looking more into the future to say, how can we change systems and practices so that those needs won't exist in the future? It requires us to look at root causes. And when we talk about aligning systems or changing systems, it goes beyond just public policy. It's also thinking about how are resources flowing, who has power, what relationships exist, and what mental models might we hold on to, what are our beliefs that carry into our actions, because we know that all systems are created by people. So in the work of Black Empowerment Works, we seek to promote Black self-determination, social mobility, and economic prosperity by resourcing and funding community-based Black-led work. We're providing resources and funding to work that not only addresses the needs as they exist today in our community, but also thinking about how we can eradicate or eliminate those needs in the future by addressing systems. More and more, we're describing the Black-led social change work, so the umbrella work that Black Empowerment Works falls under, as existing because we are compelled to hold space and provide resources to imagine and bring to life unencumbered, self-determined Black futures. This goes beyond thinking about how we close gaps and goes to the point of saying, what if we reimagined what our communities looked and felt like? And what if instead of only saying that, we want to change it where 1 in 3 Black families experiences poverty, we can close that gap between white families where it's 1 in 10 in our community. We say, what does success actually look like? And can we chart that path? Black Empowerment Works is one portion of the work that we're doing to do just that. But we describe Black Empowerment Works as being more than just a grant. While the grant funding is certainly an important component, we're also looking at what are the elements of systems change within our organization that we can shift and practice that in this space. So in terms of power, we engage community members as decision makers. So all of the grant decisions are made by folks in the community like you. We're looking to provide not only those monetary resources, but resources beyond that, whether that be connections, partnerships, and physical space, and more. Big picture, we're looking to contribute to the ecosystem of support for Black social change makers, and doing that in partnership with amazing organizations and folks in our community, because it is not work that United Way can do alone, nor should we. Since 2020, when Black Empowerment Works launched, we've engaged over 90 community members who have served as those grant decision makers. Those 90 community members have invested $2.9 million into the work of 100 Black-led efforts. In that, beyond the grant funds, we've created spaces, both physical and virtual, to allow for the BEW community to connect, celebrate, and grow. Our philosophy is that this is really a community, and once in Black Empowerment Works, you are in it for life, and we want you to be able to connect and grow alongside each other. This year alone, we have I'm going to ask folks to mute if you're not already muted. This year alone, we have $1.6 million available to invest. And while we try to keep the eligibility requirements pretty broad, we do want to share a little bit more about exactly what we're aiming for. So I'll cover pretty quickly our eligibility requirements, focus areas, how decisions are made, and what resources are available to you to support you throughout this journey. So eligibility requirements. One thing that makes Black Empowerment Works a little bit different is that the grant is open to nonprofits, for-profit social enterprises, community coalitions, and individuals, so long as their work meets our eligibility requirements. And we have 5. The first is a geographic focus. So the work must take place within the UWGC, United Way of Greater Cincinnati, 9-county region, which encompasses Hamilton, Brown, and Claremont counties in Ohio, Boone, Kenton, Campbell, and Grant counties in Kentucky, Dearborn and Ohio counties in Indiana. This just means that your work has to happen in one of those places, not all of them. Our second, and perhaps one of the most important eligibility requirements, is Black leadership and labor. We define this in 2 ways. The first is that the majority of those empowered to make decisions on behalf of your organization or group identify as Black. For us, that is 60% of your leadership team, and if you have a board, 50% of your board of directors. The second component of Black leadership and labor is an intentional focus on supporting the Black community, on providing or supporting for positive outcomes within the Black community, though not at the exclusion of other groups. Our third requirement is grassroots and community-based. We define this in 2 ways. One is smaller operations. Our goal is to invest in work that's underinvested or uninvested in. And the second is that people that are connected to the issue or the opportunity that your work addresses continue to shape that work. So we're really looking to invest in organizations and work where folks with lived experience, our context experts, are shaping what happens. Community benefit is our 4th eligibility requirement, and perhaps the most nuanced. So we define community benefit as the work that you're doing provides a broad benefit, contributes to the vitality of the community beyond what it would provide to any individual business or group. So this is not a traditional small business grant. If it gets to the place where the grant funds that you're proposing provide a bigger benefit to your organization or stakeholders, then it likely isn't eligible. And finally, actionable. This has to be work that's far enough in development or execution that it can produce measurable results by September 2024, the first year in our grant cycle. Organizations may only submit 1 application per year. And we also say that if you're doing work that is in collaboration with other organizations, that you submit 1 application for 1 body of work and not multiple applications for the same body of work. If you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat and we will get to them. Our focus areas. Just creating self-determined Black futures and addressing systems and building solutions is pretty broad work, and our focus areas demonstrate that. While I'm not going to talk through all of these, I'll highlight a couple. They largely follow or fall in the areas of education, financial stability, health, and basic needs. So you'll see the full spectrum of education from little babies all the way through post-secondary education and career development. We have areas in financial empowerment and asset building, physical health, mental health, systems change. This systems change area really gets to that point of how do we address systems root causes in addition to addressing programs. Your work should incorporate at least one of these focus areas, though there may be multiple. Ineligible work. So again, Black Empowerment Works is pretty broad, but there are some distinct categories of ineligible work. Again, this is not a general operating small business grant. So if the work really provides more of a benefit to you, your employees, stakeholders, it likely is not eligible. Capital campaigns is our second area of ineligible work. So a capital campaign is defined as a targeted fundraising effort to raise a large sum of money in a defined amount of time for a large project. So you can think about these as property development and beyond. This area is not eligible for us for a couple of reasons, one being that it likely will not produce measurable results within the grant year. Political campaigns or partisan political work is ineligible because that is true for nonprofits, and United Way is a nonprofit. So if it is work that is on a specific or for a specific candidate or targeted at a specific political party, it will not be eligible. But if it's nonpartisan political work or issue focused, it may be eligible. Debt reduction or work occurring prior to the grant period. This does not mean that you can't apply for a program or project or a body of work that you've been doing for years. What it does mean is that you cannot apply for funds or expenses that you've incurred prior to the grant period. So if you're trying to back pay an expense that will happen prior to September, it won't be eligible. And finally, of course, work occurring outside of the UWGC 9-county region. Our aim, big picture, is to invest in a diverse portfolio of work representing different organization structures from nonprofits to individuals, focus areas from birth to seniors, and communities, both in terms of geographic communities, so physical communities, and specific target populations. Our grants will range from $4,000 to $40,000 per year, and we are adding this year an opportunity for a renewal. That renewal will be contingent upon performance in that first grant year and the funding available. We'll talk about this more, and it'll come up when we talk about the qualities of or if you're grant ready. But some of the qualities of a strong application include that the proposed work is clear and easy to understand, that the budget and timeline are clear and feasible, that you can demonstrate that with funding and support, you have the capacity to carry out the work that you're proposing, that work can produce measurable results, and it's all aligned to our eligibility criteria and focus areas. But you're not alone through your journey in submitting an application. Like today, we will have other workshops touching on areas that may be important to you, from a deep dive into the application to designing, delivering, and evaluating programs and building budgets. You also have the ability to schedule for an unlimited number of question sessions. Question sessions are 30-minute virtual meetings to discuss any questions that you have, and it'll be with one of the three of us on the Black Empowerment Works team. Should you complete your application at least 2 weeks prior to the deadline, which is June 28th, you can send an email requesting a preliminary scan of that application, where we'll lift up any basic recommendations or questions that reviewers might be unclear about. And finally, you can always reach out to us by phone or email. Our phone number is 513-762-7233. That number rings to all three of us on the Black Empowerment Works team, so the likelihood that you will get a hold of someone is pretty high. If we don't answer immediately, please leave a voicemail and we'll return your call within 24 hours. Our email is black-led@uwgc.org. Again, accessible to everyone on our team. But you have heard enough from me. I'm so excited to turn it over to Christy Coons to talk about, are you grant ready? Feel free to take it away, Christy.
Well, hello. Thank you everyone for joining. This will be more of a conversation. I'm going to give some tips and go over a few things, but would love to hear from the folks on the call, questions that you may have, clarifications that you may need. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Hold on, that's all right. So the question is, are you grant ready, right? And the first question is, are you a founder / owner, or are you a CEO? And what I mean by that is there are some times where you have the idea, but not the capacity to implement the idea. You may have a great idea for a restaurant, but you're not a chef. So, and you've never run a restaurant. So you may be the owner of the restaurant, but you may have someone else who's running the day-to-day operations because that's not your skill set. You may have a great idea for a nonprofit for an area that you believe is not currently being served in the community, but you may not have experience running a business. And at the end of the day, a nonprofit organization is a not-for-profit corporation. So you still need to run it like a business. And so you may bring someone else in who runs the organization day to day, but you are still the founder, you still set the vision and et cetera. Let me go to the next. Okay, here we go. So just to go in a little bit more detail of that, founder, the person who started the company, someone who has the idea, that this may not have ever happened without that person creating it, without their vision, their creativity. So like I said previously, they're the vision, they're the mission, they're the big picture, very similar to the business owner example. A CEO or an executive director is responsible for ensuring all aspects and making sure that it runs smoothly. So this is the person that runs it as a business. They're setting the long-term plans and driving it towards success. They're communicating directly, if it's a nonprofit or a for-profit that has a board, to the board of directors. It's typically someone who's risen through the ranks in some type of business environment, so they understand the different aspects throughout an organization. And they will have a better understanding of communicating with a board and et cetera. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay, just making sure. All right. Okay, so we want you to care like the mission of a nonprofit, but we want you to run like a business. And so when someone is asking, are you grant ready? That's really what we're trying to figure out. Do you just have that mission, or are you ready to turn that mission into business? So here are some of the things that you should have before you are seeking a grant. Have you registered with the IRS and you have a federal tax ID number or a state tax ID number? If you're a nonprofit organization, have you incorporated as a 501c3 and you have your 501c3 status letter and the date that your nonprofit status started? Do you have, if you're a company, do you have your articles of incorporation? Do you have your bylaws or other governing documents? Do you have a diverse board of directors? So a lot of times when people start, particularly a nonprofit organization, and they create a board of people that they know and like and trust. And that makes sense. I understand why you would want people, this is your idea, this is your baby. Understand why you would want people that like and trust there. But do you have a diverse board? Do you have someone who's well-versed in finance? Do you have someone who's great at marketing and communications? Do you have someone who understands programming? Do you have someone who understands grants? So you want to make sure that you have a diverse skill set around your board so that if different things come up in different areas, you have someone who you can lean on to chime in, because no one is 100% an expert in all of the different categories necessary to run a successful organization. So it's so critical that you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you in something. You should have the confidence to want to be around people who are smarter than you in one area or another, or you'll never grow. And have you discussed and thought about and developed an annual budget for the organization? I'm going to pause there in case there are any questions about any of these items.
I want to build something very quick. So what I love about what you're sharing, Christy, is that if you're structured as an organization, so if you're saying, yes, I'm a for-profit or I'm a 501c3, these are all of the elements that you probably should have in place before applying to grant funds because they're foundational. If you are applying as an individual, a community coalition, the consideration that you'll want to make is, are you applying and assuming the responsibility for those grant funds, or might you go with a fiscal sponsor or another nonprofit organization that assumes the grant fund responsibility for you? You may touch on that. So I just wanted to lift that up for folks right now.
Okay. Anything else? All right. So some other things that you want to have considered and taken care of before you're applying for funding, having your mission, goals, and the population served. If you're not new, your organizational history and any outcomes or impact that you've had in the community thus far. If you're a for-profit entity, what is your business plan? A lot of times as you continue to grow and you try to get additional funding sources for-profit, people will want to know if you have a business plan. An organizational chart, a description of your management structure, size of staff, number of volunteers. So these are things that if you're just starting out and you're new, some of this you will have as you grow, but I think it's important for you to know in the beginning that these are things that you will ultimately need so that you can prepare yourself for those, even if you're not quite at the stage where some of these things apply to you quite yet. Any tax and financial data. So if you're a business in particular and you're looking for funding, even if you're new, a lot of times organizations will ask you for your personal tax and financial data information as a starting point until your organization begins to build its own business or organizational credit and financial data. So you want to make sure that you've filed your taxes timely and things of that nature. This is just if, as you grow, if you decide that you want to take on debt or things that may put an organization at risk, you want to make sure that your things are tight. So, organizational signs. Having formal and informal partnerships with educational institutions, governmental agencies, businesses, and other nonprofits. These partnerships allow the organization to better its community and sustain its programs and services. So a few moments ago, it was said, hey, if you're not ready, you can go to an organization that can be a steward of those funds. And so this is where I wanted to talk about that. So if you're not quite ready yet, but you want to have another organization handle some of these things for you, this is where having those formal and informal partnerships with different organizations can help you, right? You trust them, they trust you, they can serve as your fiscal agent. We've done that here at the Urban League for organizations before, where, we have a finance department with, multiple people in the department. We have a grants department. And so we've been able to offer that back office support for organizations before that are not quite at the stage where they're ready to do it on their own. When you're ready, then you want to have your own professional dedicated staff. If you do that, you want to make sure everyone has a job description, and so that you know how you can assess whether or not that person is doing the job that you've hired them to do. And you want to make sure that you have a basic bio and resume for your staff members, because if you go for grant funding and you're telling the grantee, this is the team that's going to work on this information, you want to make sure that, you know, they have confidence in your team. So you want to make sure that you give them their bio, their background, you know, who they are, why they are part of your team, what expertise they're bringing to the table. Going through a strategic you're going to guide your resources, where you're going to focus your time. And it's going to tell the folks that you're going to for funding that you have really sat down and you've thought through all of these different elements and that you're ready to move forward in an organized, strategic way. And then a description of the organization. If you've had history doing it, but this is the first time that you've incorporated it or things of that nature, you still want to include that because that still counts. Why you started the business or the organization in the first place, who it serves, and any accomplishments that you've had thus far.
I want to build on your comment, Christy, about having a team. So for some organizations, that may look like a paid set of staff members that are carrying out the work. For others, it may look like having a very engaged board or group of volunteers, but it's clear that you understand exactly what person or what each person is contributing to the work and ensuring that there isn't gaps in the delivery of the work. So if you're proposing something, you should probably have someone on your team or a partner that can help you carry that out.
All right. And I was just looking in the chat at some of the questions. There was a question about, do you have to have a board for profit? No, you do not. But there are some folks in here who have nonprofit organizations. And so you definitely want to have a board of directors for that. All righty. So financial signs. You want to prove that you have the fiscal capacity to be a good steward of funds. And ways that some organizations traditionally judge whether or not you are fiscally ready is number one, do you even have a business bank account? So, you know, if you're applying for a grant, whether it's you're for-profit or you're not for profit, have you already established a business bank account that the person will write the check out to or give you the direct deposit for your company? Have you established that? And there are certain things that you'll need to establish that bank account. And we talked about those a few slides ahead, you know, with your tax ID number and other things. Do you have a fundraising plan that involves a diversified stream of funding? So this applies to both a for-profit and a not-for-profit. So if you are for-profit, you know, how will you fund your business? Is it just one stream? Are you a lawyer, a law firm where it's just the fees for services? Is it another type of organization where you're providing multiple services? Is it a storefront where the revenue is going to come from folks buying your products? You know, where will that come from? If you are a not-for-profit organization, the reason why diversified funding is so important, because if you just have one stream of funding and that funding goes away, you're closed. And so people really push and advise that you want to have as many funding sources as possible, and particularly if possible to have multi-year commitments, so that there's some stability there, and you know that at least for the next 2 years or 3 years, you have enough funding or potential funders coming in to sustain your great work. Particularly if you get to the point where you want to hire employees, you definitely want to make sure that you have some solid funding, whether it's for-profit or not for profit, because now someone else's household depends on you. And so you want to make sure that, you know, someone doesn't maybe quit their job and come work for you, and then they're out of a gig in 6 months. So you definitely want to make sure that you're looking at diversified funding streams.
Black Empowerment Works is open to being your first funder, but all of those other statements that Christy mentioned holds true, right? We can be your first funder to help you carry out the work, but you have to start thinking beyond us. If this is work that you want to continue year over year, having that diverse set of folks that are contributing is going to be of the utmost importance.
And here are some of the financial signs for nonprofits. If you have a board approved organization program budget that includes all the revenue and expenses. So, I mean, this could be very simple if you're just starting out, but just showing that you understand where your what your expenses will be and what revenue sources you have to cover those expenses. So at a very basic level, that's what you need to be able to demonstrate. If you've been in existence, having your most recent 990 is important. A lot of funders some funders will require a financial audit, but that's when you get a lot larger and you've had a lot more funding coming through your organization. If folks are just starting out, that's not going to be a concern, but a lot of things that we're telling you, my assumption is that this is just the beginning for you and that you will continue to grow and grow and grow. And so I want to make sure that you have information, not just for today, but for 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, you know what you need to strive toward. Having an accounting system in place, so whether it's QuickBooks or whatever it is that some people just do this in Excel, you need some kind of system to track your expenses, particularly if you have different grants that are restricted funds. So the grantor is telling you that, we want to fund you, but we only want to fund certain activities. And so you have to track very detailed where those grant dollars are going to, so that grantor can be assured that you use those funds in only in the restricted way that they allowed you to do. Any questions on those financial signs? All right. Went back. Program and service signs. So although some funders award general operating, as I said, or unrestricted grants that can go towards your organization, unrestricted grants are rare and harder to win. So you'll want to have strong programs and services established or planned. So when you talk to a funder and if they have restricted funds, you want to be able to talk about if they only want to fund programs, and we're trying to get funders to kind of get away from that so much because it's the unrestricted dollars that help you have the capacity to do excellence in programs. But if you're dealing with a restricted grant, you definitely want to show, how these funds will go directly to those programs and services. You want to have a description of your programs. You want to have goals and objectives. You want to talk about who are the key staff members. And if it's only 1 or 2 folks, that's fine. Those are still your key staff members. How will you evaluate the program or service that you're providing? And to me, that's also a good, something good for someone who's a for-profit organization. How will you know that your customers are receiving excellent service from you? How will you measure it? If you're a speaker, will you have an evaluation that you ask folks to fill out after you do a workshop or a program or a speech? How will you know what resonated with folks, what didn't resonate with folks? For restaurants, you've got all different types of reviews, Yelp, people review you on DoorDash, people review you on all of those different platforms. So you can have that information that comes to you pretty quickly. Facebook, have reviews and things of that nature. But generally for your industry and for what you're trying to do, if you're starting with a small youth mentoring program, will you have the parents or grandparents, guardians, or the school where the kids are housed, will you have them give you feedback on the services and programming that you're providing so that you know what you need to do more of and what you may need to tweak? Grant research and planning. So you want to make sure that before you go after a grant, that you're doing your research and planning so that you're choosing the right grants at the right time. Particularly when you're small, it takes a lot of work to write a grant. And of course, I know that Black Empowerment Works has really done a lot to streamline the process and not have you, fall into some of these onerous processes that are out there. But this is for when you get funding beyond Black Empowerment Works. Sometimes the grant process can be a lot. And so you want to make sure that you don't waste your time before you spend that time applying for this grant, making sure that you align with their mission, looking up other programs that they've funded before, and do you seem aligned with their focus areas. You don't want to expand your mission or what you do to get funding, because then you quickly become overwhelmed and outside of your scope, and that just never ends well. So you want to make sure that you don't create services and programming just to get grant dollars, or just to get, even as a for-profit, you don't want to just start adding a service because you think that it's going to help add to the bottom line, unless it's something that truly aligns with what you ultimately want to do. It aligns with the other services that you provide. You feel that you have the background and expertise to do so. So whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, you want to really stay within your scope. And then, developing a strategic approach just to select which grants you want to apply for. And that's, once again, for-profit or nonprofit. We at the League have a large business side, our Business Development and Entrepreneurship Center, which helps women and Black-owned companies with grants and technical assistance and all of those different things. And so a lot of the things that I'm talking about today, I'm thinking about with respect to the folks on both the nonprofit side that we work with, but also on our for-profit women and Black-owned companies. And having a grant calendar, because you're going to have reports that are due, information that grantors are going to want on a regular basis, and you want to make sure that you're getting that information in timely. Having a clear understanding of how much money you need to raise from grants, when it's needed, and what each grant will be used for. So that's when we talked several slides ago about building a budget. That's making sure that you understand what it takes for you to run your business. Whether your business is a for-profit or a not-for-profit, you need to have a budget that tells you how much revenue comes in and how much you have in expenses, to make sure you know how much money you need to raise. And that is critically important to being an ongoing successful enterprise. And you may start working on a grant and realize, once you get in it, that it's not a great fit for you, or you don't have the capacity to finish a quality proposal by the deadline. And if that's the case, it's probably best to stop, because if you turn in something that doesn't reflect your best work and you go after a grant from that same organization later, they may remember that you turned in something that did not reflect your best work. Same with a for-profit. If you're going after grant dollars or investments and you don't have everything ready, you want to pull back and make sure that you have everything ready, because sometimes you don't get a second chance to make that first impression, and you don't want them to always have in the back of their mind, that you're not quite there yet. And then if you get a grant management, going along with what we talked about, making sure that you have processes in place to actually do the outcomes that you told them you were going to do. You laid out this, this outline. I'm going to do all of these great things. And you got awarded the money based on the fact that you were going to do all of these great things. So now you need to make sure that you're able to manage the grant, having the right staff and systems in place to do the program or services that you said you were going to deliver. On the for-profit side, making sure that If you said that you're going to do that your company is going to do certain things, that you're delivering on the things that you promised, and that you're doing it with excellence. And so these were just some of the sources that I used to go over those points, but wanted to really stop there to have more of a conversation to answer specific questions that folks may have about being grant ready.
So at this point, we invite people to come off of mute to ask questions or to drop them in the chat.
Hello. Hold on. Sorry, I forgot if I took my headphones off, I wouldn't be able to hear you. So one of the questions that I have is around if we have two separate programs that aren't really related, but we're strongly involved in both, can we apply for both programs or should we just focus on one?
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question clearly. So are you saying your organization or group does two separate programs, or are you saying that you as an individual are involved in two separate organizations or groups doing two different bodies of work?
The first one. So my organization is interested in doing two separate programs, one dealing with mothers and one dealing with children. So they really would focus on two different aspects of the grant. But should I apply for both programs or just for one?
So you can make that determination. I think an important consideration to make is how, and this is building on everything Christy has said, how many or how much in resources do you need to carry out any one of those programs? So the cap for your organization to apply is $40,000. What you wouldn't want to do is to throw in a bunch of programs and then you end up in a space where you're given like $500 here and $1,000 here, and then you don't have the resources to fully carry it out. So you can decide whether you want to incorporate both aspects of your program into one application or to only request funds for one program that you're operating.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, one other thing I would say, I was at a National Urban League conference this past week, and Mackenzie Scott had given big chunks of, 8 million. I think the lowest was like maybe 1.5 million, and the highest I think maybe was like 8 to 12 million to urban leagues across the country. And they were asking, well, what was it about the leagues that got it versus the ones who didn't? And some of the things that came out was like social media, looking at an organization's social media to see if they're posting what they're doing out in the community. Like some of you are probably doing great work, both with your for-profit or your not-for-profit. And, are you posting that stuff? Are you showing that you're out here doing the work? Is your LinkedIn? I know that they said that they looked on LinkedIn profiles of the CEOs to see what they were doing and if they were active and what their backgrounds were. So, there are things that you're doing that people are watching that you may not be aware of. And once you are out there as either as a business or an entity or an organization, you want to make sure that you are a good steward. So if you're not ready to update a Facebook or Instagram page on a regular basis, then don't put it up there, because then you may just have one post and it looks like you're not ready yet, or you're not, you're not with it. And it could impact your ability to get funding. And you probably don't even think about that. You may think, hey, I fill out this grant application or I apply for this business cohort for my company, and don't realize that those other things have an impact on your ability to receive funding.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question. Um, our organization, we don't have yet the 510C. It is possible to apply with that part. So we are on the process, but I don't know if we can get that done because it looks like it's gonna take a while, 3 to 4 months. So we just start this 510C, but we already have the Ohio State certificate, the EIN number, and the bank account. Well, we're missing the 501c, so it is possible to apply with that this 501c. That's our question.
Great question. So the answer is yes. We ask about your organizational structure, so a 501c3 versus for-profit, individual or community coalition, to understand how we're going to pay the funds out to you. If you're a nonprofit organization, 501c3 designated, we would provide you the grant directly, and it would follow all of the processes of a 501c3, right? You'd file your 990 at the end of the year, and your organization is assuming the tax liability for that grant. For a for-profit organization, it's the same. So we would set you up as a vendor in our system, and that grant would be reflected like any revenue or dollars you're bringing into your organization. If you're another structure, you're not a formal for-profit and you're not a 501c3, the consideration you're going to want to make is who and what entity is assuming the tax liability. We really point people away from saying, I as an individual will assume the liability and claim it on my taxes. That's chaos. Don't do that. If you have a nonprofit organization that would be willing to serve as a fiscal sponsor for you, so they assume or receive the grant funds on your behalf, and then you're in partnership with them to spend it down, that's an option. We do have the ability also that if you have applied for your 501c3, you're selected for funding, but you don't have it in place yet, we can hold off on paying you your grant funds out until you do have it in place. We have had a couple of people who, in the process of being a Black Empowerment Works grantee, were awarded their 501c3, and we shifted the relationship from a for-profit to their nonprofit. But really, it is just about who assumes the risk. So long answer to your very short question is yes, you can still apply.
Thank you. That's one of the things. So with the 510c, it is possible to get a help with your guys to get that 510c, or we have to go our own way to apply, and we a lawyer. So we are a non-profit organization. So we just and we just started. I mean, I don't know if that's gonna help us a little bit to get that 501c.
Yeah, such a great question. And I want to build on, it actually leads me to a comment that I wanted to build on something that Christy mentioned earlier. So general operating dollars are very hard to come by, and the Black Empowerment Works grant tries to operate in a space that's quasi-general operating, meaning that you are able to put into your budget the resources that you need to carry out your work, whether that's staff time or consultants or travel. So you have the ability to build into your grant that you would like resources to help you to file your 501c3. Beyond that, if you're selected for funding, again, our focus is to build or to support the building of an ecosystem of support for change makers. We do have other resources available to the BEW community to help you with building out the capacity of your organization in ways such as that. So we have folks that may be able to support you in filing that paperwork, and you don't incur the cost for your organization if funded. You're welcome. Other questions from folks? You all are asking really great questions. I appreciate it. Well, just know that this isn't the only time that you can reach out to us as the United Way team. So we do have all of those resources available to you to help guide you through the application process, including our upcoming session. So definitely recommend that if you are available for the next 3 Tuesdays at this hour, that you attend our session on the deep dive of the BEW application, which is next Tuesday, designing, delivering, and evaluating programs, which is the following Tuesday, the 23rd, and our final session on building a budget that works, which is on the 30th. You can reach out to us via phone or email if you need things. We're so available to you, and we look forward to you applying or reaching out to ask questions. I am going to officially stop our recording. Thank you all.